Welcome everyone. I am very privileged to have with us today the Asia Pacific Financial Services leader of Microsoft, Basudev Banerjee, joining us for a fireside chat over the next 15 minutes. Basu and his team over at Microsoft are relied upon for their thought leadership and strategic advice to the financial services sector in the region. Basu, thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Iman.
All right, to get us started, Basu, and you are from one of the biggest tech companies in the world, so I thought a controversial question might be around how the tech companies want to become banks and the banks want to become tech companies. Not so much about Microsoft, but what you're seeing in the market today. Now, to give you a bit of context of what I'm thinking is, you know, we're seeing two worlds collide, and we're seeing this war for engagement for the customer's attention, and we're seeing that in banking. The big techs are starting to eat away at the banks, and the banks are desperately trying to capture the engagement and the eyeballs of the customers on their devices. We've seen this play out many, many times before in different industries. So if we take the hotel industry, it got disrupted by Airbnb, who doesn't have any properties. If we take the media industry, the Netflix era killed the video store. Why? Because the customers want a different experience. The customers want right here, right now, anytime, any place, on my terms. We're seeing that play out in financial services. So, and we're seeing that across the market. So what's to say that Grab or Apple can't offer the same experience? The Neos have tried to doing this before, but the Neos didn't have customers. They had technology. What's your take on this war between the big techs and the banks?
Great question, because every customer interaction we have today with traditional banks and financial services organizations, this is the kind of discussions which opens up. So we see a natural convergence of traditional and non-transitional businesses happening. And not only that, the convergence are happening across industries. For example, if you see the new digital banks, most of the licensees are not traditional. That's the way the licenses are created, whether it is Singapore Telecom or Grab or some other agencies. So this is going to continue, because one thing we need to be very clear about is banking is a regulated industry. So while the super apps, big techs and fintechs can provide some banking services, obviously they cannot replace the banks, because they cannot do many of the services which a traditional bank provides. For example, the credit underwriting, the whole issuance of guarantee, and many other things. Now, on the other side, the banks have also realized that they also lack the agility, the innovation, the capabilities to satisfy a customer needs on a Netflix or a Grab or an Apple or maybe other super app platform structure. And that's where we see more and more banks, and not only banks, traditional organizations, large organizations, are adopting technology and trying to be as close to this new age providers. And that's why a few years ago, Microsoft CEO Satya said that all the companies, all the organizations will soon be a software organization, software company. That doesn't mean that they will stop their core business, core functions, and they will turn themselves as a technology company. What we meant is that to be successful, to be more customer centric, you need to have a very agile innovation process where you can quickly turn around with new products, new services, which best fits the customer's requirement. So there is a gap between this, what the banks were doing, and what customers have experienced from these super apps, fintechs, and big techs. And that's where the banks are now trying to bridge this gap. Also, you need to understand that few days ago, Brad Smith, our global corporate and legal affairs, said that this era will be the 1930s of the banks for the tech companies, because tech companies more and more will come under jurisdictions, under governance, under regulations. So their operating environment is also going to change soon. We are seeing that all across the world. Now, how do banks become more agile and innovative? That's where technology plays the critical role. And I think that's where we as technology providers, we play a critical role to stitch that whole story together, that how you can elevate your customer interactions to a level where customers feel you are at par, if not better, at par with Netflix and other e-commerce or other super apps they experience with.
That's great. I'm just going to double click on a word that you've used a couple of times in that, the super apps, right? Because it's really, really interesting in what we're seeing with some of these platforms, and or as you call them, super apps. So like if I take Grab as an example, Grab's now diversified into many, many different areas, including financial services. So, you know, a good example of, you know, a story somebody mentioned to me a couple of weeks ago was, you know, how Grab is enabling even street vendors in places like Jakarta to reach into new markets and new customers that they traditionally wouldn't have been able to, right? So if you think of a traditional street vendor, they make the food, they sell it on the side of the street. That's the supply and demand. But with the likes of Grab, they've been enabled to basically reach into new customers across the entire city, with Grab doing not only the deliveries, but also Grab's getting into the financial services side of it with these partnerships with other fintechs, companies like Ovo, offering loans to, for example, this particular street vendor, which then enables a street vendor to double down and open up another store. So it's a really fascinating, collide of the big two worlds that we're seeing right now. And I'm just, for one, really interested to see where it's going to end.
Absolutely. And you can see what's happening is, while Grab and other similar players are becoming super apps, it is just to support the whole ecosystem where you operate. So with Grab, with its food delivery app, its transport key core function where Grab started, its supply chain, now banking. And if you flip that, even e-commerce players are also trying to address the same ecosystem from the other side. You see Bukalapak, which is the largest e-commerce in Indonesia, they are now tied up with Standard Chartered Bank, because Standard Chartered Bank will be extending digital financial services through Bukalapak e-commerce. So you're absolutely right. The super apps and big techs and fintechs, these distinctions are becoming blurred more and more. And banks are also realizing that we need to work very closely with these players who have created their own ecosystem of partners, and which is actually the final outcome or final goal is to have a better customer experience, customer satisfaction, so that the stickiness of the customer on my platform, whether it is a banking platform or a transportation platform or e-commerce platform, increases. So that's where I think even banks are aspiring to be and colliding with these big techs and super apps.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's fascinating is all these big techs have access to millions and millions of customers where they already have relationships with. So for them, it's extension of that relationship. And this is where I think the banks need to be worried compared to what they saw from disruptors in the neo space.
Absolutely.
All right, Basu. So we've heard about the big techs. We've heard about the disruption, what's happening around the market. We've heard what the neos have tried to do. Now, why do you think there's an opportunity in the market? Because, we see that there is probably a bit of a mismatch between what the banks are prioritizing versus what the customers want. Do the banks really know what their customers want?
Definitely, they understand well. But they have their limitations, because as a bank, we are talking about the traditional banks, not the grounds up new creations digital bank. So they have their legacy applications, legacy processes, the regulatory jurisprudence, and they're answerable to the regulators and the central banks and the governments. So they have, they're handicapped. Now, more and more what we are seeing is the banks are adopting new technologies, like the way you see the super apps and all. And that's where they are waking up to the new technology adoption. So we see banks now adopting AI ML for, say, customer onboarding. We see banks adopting new open solution platforms like Backbase to bring in all the ecosystem players, which will support their banking and financial services business. So it's not that banks are sleeping. We see banks all across Asia Pacific, actually all across the globe, and mostly during this pandemic period, they understand where they need to invest, and we see that investments is happening. Now, is it going to be one silver bullet and very easy process? Answer is definitely no. Imagine a bank which is in business for last 50, 60 years with traditional business processes, the traditionals and cultures embedded into the system with people, and the technology legacy which they are running with. So there is a time which will be required, but we have seen the whole digital transformation fast forwarding during this pandemic period. So have seen 3-4 years of digital transformation being done in a year, starting last year, and now continuing. So this will be the future where banks will continuously evolve, bring in new innovations, bring in new technology partnerships, selections of new platforms, open platforms, which helps them to bring the whole ecosystem together. And that's going to continue for some time. And that's a huge, huge investment space for all concerned.
Yeah, look, we're certainly seeing that across the market, right? And the banks that are investing are the ones that are starting to make great strides in their customers and the customer experience, and that war for engagement is definitely on. You know, from some of our work and what we're seeing around the market, you know, the things that the customers are valuing the most, or what they want to get from their banks. So this is for the bankers on the call, is, you know, things like spend analysis, understanding and categorizing where the customer's money is being spent on the apps. You know, subscription and recurring revenue management is a big area. I think as we enter the era of the subscription economy and the subscriptions become the norm, a lot of customers, and they want to understand how better to manage those subscriptions when it comes to their finances. And then, you know, thirdly, personalized recommendations, right? So again, they want to be able to, you know, interact with the bank, not through traditional channels, but, you know, they want to be able to, you know, do it on their terms, their time. They want to whip out an app, open their app and see personalized recommendations. And, you know, certainly I myself as a user and a customer, you know, value that quite greatly in today's digital age. Now, just moving quickly right along there, Basu, you know, I want to talk a little bit about the technology side of things, and what you guys are seeing over at Microsoft of how traditional and outdated legacy technology is really becoming the barrier to entry for a lot of these banks into the new digital era. And, you know, what is your recommendation for them to address this challenge and remove some of these barriers?
So we strongly believe that to overcome the legacy technology challenges, first of all, the banks or any other organization needs to have a strategic blueprint where they want to be in 3 years' time and how they want to be there, what they want to achieve, what are the business priorities. And depending upon that, the core thing is to determine on the platform-based approach. Sorry about that. Now, when we talk about platform, it is not about the core infrastructure platform. It is also the employee productivity platform. It is also about your digital engagement platform. So starting from a customer touch point, the solution level to the underlying technology, there has to be a platform which is agile, which is open, which is scalable, which is interoperable. And these are the decisions which the banks need to take. Apart from taking a siloed approach, they need to look for this horizontal big picture and build the story on top of it. Because unless you do that, you don't know what kind of ecosystem partner will be in your system tomorrow and what kind of technology support, process support they will be requiring. And that's where this horizontal platform-centric approach is going to be super critical for success.
Absolutely. We're seeing that play out right in front of our eyes, right? Even some of the big industry titans, you know, with big wallets and big investments into digital banking, are starting to think twice about, you know, building everything in-house, right? Absolutely. You know, I think one of the beauties of technology and what we're seeing in the modern platform era is, I think everyone's figured out and realized that, hey, you don't have to build everything in-house, that you should be able to have a strategy that takes best of breed pieces from, you know, the subject matter experts or the leaders of that industry, and then be able to stitch them together using a common fabric. And certainly that's our belief here at Backbase, in that we want to provide the engagement banking platform to banks that is going to be able to help them create the bank that their customers are going to love. But also it's going to be able to keep up to date with the ever-changing rapid pace of technology, which traditionally banks have been able to do in-house, but they no longer can support that regardless of their size and how much they're spending. All right, well, with that, I want to thank you for your time, Basu. It's been a great pleasure having you on.
Thank you very much.
I'd now like to hand over the floor to our Backbase Regional Vice President of Customer Success, Abhijit, who will be moderating a very interesting panel with 3 of our customers within the region. And we'll be doing a deep dive into some specific issues or opportunities around the various countries that these banks operate in. Abhijit, the floor is yours.